Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for taking time to be on this webinar. And I know many of you were on the webinar this morning at 10. And what we are hoping to do today is just give you another place to hear from others and hear about resources in the state that are available to childcare providers and to address some questions and assure you that we are recording questions that you're asking. I am Robin Lightcap, and I'm the chair of Groundwork Ohio, which is the statewide advocacy organization for early childhood. And I also lead the early childhood collaborative work in the Dayton area with Learn to Earn Dayton and Preschool Promise. And I just want to start by saying, first of all, how much I appreciate all of you, because you are faced with incredibly difficult decisions right now. And I know many of you have been dealing with the stress of the uncertainty about what's going to happen next and when it's going to happen and what to do about taking care of your families, what to do about taking care of your staff. And so what we've done today is ask some of your fellow colleagues to share with you how they are processing and thinking about all of these changes that are happening so quickly. Obviously, things change every single hour, so we do not have all of the answers, and we are not speaking on behalf of the state. We are not the state. Many of you heard this morning from Director Hall and Kara and Leanne Cornyn from the governor's office and heard about the temporary license that is being set up. And we are going to give you a quick highlight of that, and then we'll hear from the other folks on the call. And I had asked a few minutes ago, I asked for you to do the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You can see that there's a Q&A, but I think actually if you could shift over and post your questions in chat, because we are still learning the technology on how to use Zoom and all of these online functions. And we know that we can download your questions that you post in the chat room. So if you could put them in the chat room, we can promise that we will record them all and we will carry them forward to the state as they continue to work around the clock on getting answers to all of the important questions. So that's our plan. If you have not heard yet, the temporary licensing procedures were posted by ODJFS and you can find them on the website. I'll ask Julia to just post it again in the chat room so that you don't have to look for them and you can go and click on them. I know they're also posted on the Groundwork website and on our Preschool Promise website here in the Dayton area. You can find them under the Preschool Promise /COVID updates page. But again, I am not a State Department employee, but just in case you have not read them yet, the governor has issued emergency rules that will allow for temporary licenses for existing childcare facilities and also for additional facilities who might be well suited to serve some of the essential workforce in this pandemic. And the way the state has written it in these temporary licensing procedures is that it is a new rule which sets the process and requirements for the temporary pandemic childcare license. And it will allow approved programs to serve children whose parents are employed, providing health, safety, and other essential services as defined by the Director of the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services in consultation with the Director of the Ohio Emergency Management Agency. And we do not yet know the official definition. I know that's one question everyone is asking, is who is an essential worker? And I know an important question we all have is a childcare employee an essential worker? Obviously, if they're asked to work in a pandemic license situation, they're falling, I think, underneath that, but we do not have official definition from the state yet. And there is not clarity around how the payment will work for those programs in the pandemic license at this point. I know there are a lot of questions about that, and you can read these temporary procedures, but I don't think those details have yet been released. The other thing that many of you know about is last week on Friday, the emergency rules were released, and Karen Lampe is on the phone, and she is with the Ohio Association of Childcare Providers. She also leads a childcare organization here in the Dayton area. And I asked if she would be willing to go over some of those emergency rules from last Friday, because I know we're still getting a lot of questions about the pandemic days and about absent days and how that works and whether or not they apply to our family child care providers. And one thing that was clarified on the call this morning at 10 o'clock is that the pandemic days are to be used now if you choose to close your program, but the pandemic days would not be used in the event that the governor mandates closure for childcare programs. So we don't know for sure that the governor is going to do that, but we would suggest you prepare for that. And in the event that he does mandate closure for childcare programs, there would be a different payment structure, which is also explained in these temporary procedures that were released. And the way they explain it is that the department would establish a weekly payment, which reflects a historical weekly payment for the program, and would provide it through the duration of the closure as long as funds allow. So I know the intent from the administration that was shared this morning is to continue to fund providers who have been serving publicly funded children in the event of a mandated closure, assuming funds are there. So Karen, can I ask you to come on now and talk a little bit about the emergency rules that were released last Friday? Thank you.
Here we go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So welcome everybody. And I just want to say thank you all for jumping on this call again. And thank you to Robin and Groundwork and all the other organizations that helped to make this happen. I'm so, glad to see us working together to try and get word out to those of us in the childcare community that are struggling with trying to figure out how to keep up with these changes as they're coming so quickly, and figure out what changes we need to make within our programs to make sure that we're helping serve the families that are in such great need at this time. So last week, the Ohio Association of Child Care Providers and the Ohio Child Care Resource and Referral Agencies put together some asks of the department for some emergency rules around this COVID-19 challenge. And they were very quick to respond. The list of rules that we gave them was, or list of asks was pretty lengthy. But what they said was, we can give you, initially we're going to work on all of these things, but right now, what are the things that we need most right now? And so we were very pleased that they acted on those so quickly. And so Friday, they did come out and file some emergency rules to help us deal with the short term right now with this challenge. And so you have probably seen that on Friday they gave us 10 additional absent days per child. So instead of there being 10 days every 6 months, they gave us 20 days. And that's because they recognize the fact that right now during this crisis, we may have lots of children who are not attending, either because they're sick or someone in their family is sick, or because the parents are concerned about and doing the social distancing that our governor is asking them to do. But they didn't want that to affect providers' payments during this time. And so they gave us those additional absent days, which is, in my mind, incredibly generous and helpful. Secondly, they gave us 21 pandemic days because they knew many providers would choose or have to close down during this time. And so that, again, they wanted to make sure that providers could financially survive during this crisis. And so they put those pandemic days in place. The additional things that they did was they also recognized that we were going to have a challenge with staffing. And this one was a hard one for, I think, all of us that have lived and died on quality in this field to kind of swallow and understand, is that they increased ratios. And the reason they did that is not because they wanted us serving more children with less teachers. What they recognized was that from a day-to-day basis, we may all of a sudden just have an employee that doesn't show up or can't show up or is sick. And they didn't want us to have to shut down our building and stop serving all the children in our building because we all of a sudden were going to be out of ratio. So they were just trying to give us a little bit of flexibility in that. It wasn't that they wanted us necessarily to be operating at that larger capacity. But so that was another thing that they did, and they actually went above and beyond what the ask was from in the letter that we sent them. So, and then finally, the other thing that they did was they told us that there was going to be a little bit of flexibility around Step Up to Quality and meeting the guidelines of Step Up to Quality during this time. There's going to be a lot more details, I think, that come on that one, but it at least allowed those of us that were working on Step Up or right in the midst of a renewal or an application to recognize the fact that we were going to hit the pause button just for a minute and allow us to breathe and focus on what was most important, which right at this time, the most important thing is health and safety. And so we were appreciative that they recognized that that was what was necessary during this crisis. So those were the initial things that they gave us or announced, I should say, on Friday. Today, obviously, they also shared with us that the pandemic days were expected to be used only during this time while childcare providers were not shut down by the governor's orders. But as Robin mentioned earlier, they have shared often and loudly with us that that could come, and that was something that we needed to be prepared for and thinking about. So I encourage all of you in your organizations to make sure that you're thinking about what would that look like in your organization. And I was very pleased today that they said that they would help to provide financial support for those providers that serve publicly funded childcare during that closure. More to come, I think, on what that'll look like exactly. But I think that is at least a little bit of a relief that providers that serve predominantly publicly funded children can say, okay, we can make it through a few weeks of this if we need to. So with that, Robin, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Karen, can I ask you to explain to folks about how they actually use the pandemic days? I know we're getting questions about if they'll see that on the system and how that works.
Right. So we're still working to get clarification on some of that. From my understanding is they were going to use the TAP system, there's a PD button that we can use in order to charge for PD days. And I believe they were going to expand that to be able to be utilized beyond PD days. Recognize the fact that whatever they have to do in the TAP IT system takes time. It's not something that they can easily flip the switch on. And so while they have allowed us these changes, it may take them a second or two to make those switches within the system so that it shows that way.
Great, thank you for that clarification. And I know there are questions about what about those of us that are private pay and that don't have publicly funded kids? This is a big issue. We understand that. Yes. The pandemic days are only for publicly funded childcare. And at this point, there isn't an answer we have on JFS. There are other things that we are looking into to try to give you resources. Michelle Davis on the phone today will be talking about SBA loans. And while all those things are not figured out, she's going to share a little bit more, but the pandemic days do only apply for publicly funded childcare.
Correct. And I do want to emphasize for those providers out there that do not serve publicly funded childcare that OACCP and OCRA did not forget about you. And in our request to the state, there were many, many pieces within that where we address that issue. I do think that in time, those are things that the department and the administration will be able to start addressing. But in the short term, they are trying to deal with the most vulnerable children in the state. And those obviously are publicly funded children. And so that's where they've chosen to put their emphasis in the short term. Let's remember that it's only been about a week and a half that we all have been dealing with this. And they've done an enormous amount of work, and the lift that they have had to do in that time frame is huge. And so I know it's hard to be patient. I have a lot of our program is private pay, and so it's very challenging for us as well. I encourage you to look closely into the SBA loan. I think that that will be a little bit of a place that might give us a little bit of breathing room. And I know also there's some federal language that hopefully will be able to help along those lines as well. And we've been watching the federal movement as that's happened as well.
Thank you. And I know there are questions about co-pays, and that's something that we have discussed with the state too, made recommendations. I know they're still looking at that, so there is not an answer at this point in time about how co-pays will be handled. So that's just to answer those of you who are asking that. The other thing is there is not a time frame. We hear you very clearly, and we are advocating for this too, that we want as much advance notice as possible if the governor mandates closure for childcare. We know what a domino effect that has on your families and your teachers. And so we are encouraging the state to give as much time as possible, but we do not have any answer on what that time frame would be like. So I encourage you to go ahead and make plans and be prepared, but we do not have any timeline. So I think there also was a question about if for the pandemic license, how you apply for it. In this packet that just came out from ODJFS with the temporary licensing procedures, there in the back of the packet, there is an actual application. It's a one-page Word document, or actually it's the PDF that they posted, but it's an application. It's one page that you need to complete and submit. And at the bottom, it has, you just email it to the ODJFS childcare line. And then there also is an application for filling this out for families who would qualify for this pandemic childcare. So you need to download, click on this link. So I'll ask Julia to post the link yet again in the chat box so that you all can easily find it. But that's where you find the application to apply for your center to have a temporary license. And we did ask on the call this morning, and Kara said that the pandemic license does not apply to family childcare. So we are still seeking clarity about how family childcare will fit in the communication going forward. So I know we keep getting that question. The other thing is somebody asked about how Step Up to Quality relates to the pandemic licensure, and there isn't any requirement for the site to be star rated. But at the bottom of this first page of the emergency procedures here, it talks about when approving programs for temporary licensure, ODJFS will use discretion regarding the number of licenses approved based on need and the pandemic health concerns. And they'll evaluate programs based on location, capacity, and number of children being served with parents employed to provide health, safety, or essential services. So that's as far as we've gotten in that clarity. So those of you who are interested, if the governor chooses to mandate closure for childcare, that's why you would apply for this pandemic license, just to clarify that. The other question, I know we're getting a lot of questions about Step Up to Quality and if deadlines. Everybody has been working hard to meet the July 1, 2020. Lots of confusion about, is that going to get pushed back? Obviously, the priority right now is to focus on these emergency rules. We don't have clarity yet from the state. Karen, do you want to address that as well?
Yeah, again, we don't have clarity for that in the state right now. And I think obviously most important right now is helping us through this crisis. And I've been explaining it with people to just think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And while I am a 5-star programs within our site, and we are very committed to Step Up to Quality, right now we recognize that the needs are much more basic than that, and that we've got to focus on that first, and then we'll look at how do we make sure that we get programs back up to those high quality expectations.
Great, thank you, Karen. Okay, so we are going to move now. We have asked Steph, who is a family child care provider in Lawrence County in Chesapeake, I believe. If you could just introduce yourself, Steph, and tell us a little bit about your child care program, and then if you could tell us how you are managing these uncertain hours and days. Hey, Steph, we can't hear you very well.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We've got an echo going on there, so maybe if, are you called in on your telephone and also looking at your computer?
Okay, how's this?
There we go, that's better.
Okay, perfect. I want to begin by introducing myself. I'm Steph Janicio, and I run all Nestled in family childcare in Lawrence County, Chesapeake, Ohio. The first thing I want to say to our family childcare providers is please know that your voice is valued. You are an integral part to the planning and the process of providing quality care to the children and families that are coming into your home. We want you to know that your voice matters and that we are speaking collectively for family childcare to build a framework of response. And we want to know, what is that framework of response going to look like? So I wanted to tell you a few things that I'm doing here. And I took the Step Up to Quality model, and I took a couple components from that. The first one being learning and development. I want to be sure that every child that comes into my home knows that they are entering a safe and loving environment. And that is super important that we all continue that level of quality and care. Secondly, advocating. It is so important for you to get online, contact your congressmen and your senators, and express the importance of family child care and the role that we play in being the first responders for children and families. The next thing is your community and your family partnerships. You know, through Step Up to Quality, you've been developing these over the years, and those are the people that you want to work with, and you want to create a commitment so that you can reach out to them and say, hey, our child care has these resources, or our child care needs these resources. So don't be afraid to reach out and network with your peer-to-peer network of other family child care providers and the leaders in your communities. That's so important. Finally, family and community partnerships go beyond all of that. We reach out to our administration, to our leadership on the local, state, and national levels. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to be a voice for family child care, because you are speaking for the children and the families. And no one knows them better than family child care. We are a direct line of communication to those families each and every day as they enter our homes. In each county, get with your family child care providers and create some resource networks where you can assist with food drives, getting cleaning supplies between providers. It's a time for us all to step up and to support not just the children and families, but our own staff, our own families, and our own neighbors. So Fred Rogers, in a conversation with his mother, said, in times of crisis, look for the helpers. And family child care, please know that you are that voice, you are that helper, and you are so important to this conversation. And while we don't have direct answers, this is a very fluid process, and we are all working together to find a common goal that supports children and families, but most importantly, you. So take care of yourselves. If you need to close, that's something that you'll need to decide on your own. And if you choose to stay open, please know that the early childhood community is here, and we hear you and we support you. And I apologize, I have such a sore throat. I'm not contagious, but please hang in there and fight the good fight, girls.
Thank you, Steph, for sharing from your heart there about how important and just so you all know, I personally have advocated for family child care providers to be allowed to continue to operate. Obviously, you are in a smaller setting and often have smaller group sizes and have those relationships with families, even if the governor mandates closure, but that's just my personal opinion and request. And I know others are advocating, certainly Groundwork is advocating for family child care providers to be considered in this. So I know the state will address it. It just is not clear yet where family child care providers will fall in those future communications. So just know that we are definitely talking and thinking about how to support family child care during this. Okay, next we're going to ask Misty Norman. Misty leads a program in Franklin County and Columbus, a child care center. So Misty, if I could ask you to describe a little bit about your program and how you are managing these challenging times.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello, okay, hi, this is Misty Norman. I'm calling from Heavenly Kids Center for Learning. We are a privately owned child care center. We have about 130 children between the ages of 6 weeks to 5 years old that we care for on a day-to-day basis. Gosh, we're still spinning. I do want to say, you know, it's interesting how when crisis happens, it does bring the community together. And so if nothing else, the good out of this is that we're starting to unify and talk as providers and think about ways to support our families and each other mainly, because it's been a journey, a very hard journey. Last week, I was a part of the governor's conversation on Friday, and I was optimistic. I felt that, you know, we weren't going to be shut down, and we were going to be moving forward. I came to work on Monday, and from out of 130 kids, we had 50 that showed up. And although when our phones were ringing off the hook, especially since the schools closed, obviously the parents reacted. The next day we had about 30. Today was Wednesday. I think we have about 25. And so I feel strongly about parents needing to stay home with their children to keep them safe. But at the same time, as a business owner, what do you do when you go from 130 kids to 30? And so we are still brainstorming on how we are going to move forward. But the biggest thing I felt was important is communication. Not only with our teachers, which we've been doing either in person or over the phone or email, because obviously with our numbers dropping to that degree, a lot of teachers either chose to stay home or, you know, the teachers that are still here, we're kind of on rotation. But it's just so important to communicate with the families, even though they've been calling. But we started using, prior to this, and I guess our timing was good, we started using a program called Class Dojo. And for any families that are a part of the Columbus City School District, that is their online or app that they use to communicate with families. And so that has been kind of our saving grace to keep us in contact with our families. It's a text messaging communication system. We can upload photos and all kinds of things, just like if you're familiar with Hi Mama or Tadpole. Those are some of the big communication systems that are out for child care centers. But I advocate Class Dojo because most of our families come from the Columbus City School area. And so they would just roll over their children and use that system once they go to elementary and beyond. And so just, again, want to make it clear, just communicate with your families, even if it's just, hey, we're thinking about you, and or whatever. One of our teachers is not here. And actually we have one of our classrooms are part of the Early Start program, and those are, if you're not familiar with that, they follow the Columbus City School schedule. So once Columbus City is out, those children are out. We had 20 children in that program, and so the teacher and the children are out, and our teacher has been communicating with the families, which has been going really nicely. But again, I just want to stress, not only should we be communicating with one another, which is huge, we really have to unite at this time and have one mind, so that it doesn't seem like we're all over the place as providers, even though we're individual organizations. A lot of us are, but just making sure that we're uniting and sharing ideas so that the workforce, the early child care profession will look unified. And then secondly, ensure that we're communicating with our families in some capacity. Again, I'm a big advocate for Class Dojo, but of course, Hi Mama, Tadpole, and, you know, a host of others that are out there are good as well.
Thank you, Misty. Is there anything you can say about how you're handling tuition for your private pay families? I know people are really
Wow,
struggling
yeah.
with what to do about that.
And so we're taking it 1 week at a time. What we've done with our private pays is they've always had vacation time. We kind of give them the same benefit as our PFCC families. And by the way, we have 80% of our enrollment are PFCC, about 20% are private pay. And so we gave our private pay parents 10 days, so 2 weeks of free tuition, so that we can think through this process. To be honest, it's obviously hard financially for us to hold their spot, but I just can't imagine for a family to not be working and still have to pay childcare when we're closed. So I gave them those 2 weeks so that we can process, and I shared with them that we'll be in communication on how we'll be moving forward after those 10 days of their vacation is up.
Thank you, Misty. Okay, so Patty, are you there? Let's see if we can hear you. I'm not sure if Patty is there, so we're going to keep moving forward. Just, I know there are a lot of questions about the pandemic license and how to apply and the timeline and all of that. There is not clarity on a timeline on when you would be notified, but you can go ahead and apply right now. So I would encourage you, if you are considering doing that, you can apply. If this is something, I would also encourage you to consider your insurance coverage, speak with your insurance agent, your attorney as you consider that, because obviously there is risk involved. It is critical that we have childcare to support our essential workers, and we just want to make sure we support you in making wise decisions about how you proceed too. I am trying to see if we can get an insurance expert to be on the call on Friday to give some advice about that. But obviously I don't have answers to that right now, but that's just another factor for you to consider. So I'd like to move to Kim Tice, if she could quickly share about OAUIC. I want to make sure we have time for you to hear about the SBA process at a high level too. Oh, Patty is on now. Patty, do you want to chime in first quickly here about another perspective from a child care center?
Sure. So Learning Grove is a new agency that came about through a merger of Cincinnati Early Learning Centers and Children, Inc. Interesting enough, both agencies started as single site programs. So my brain always goes to single site programs when we're dealing with things like this. We have 21 early childhood programs and 27 school age programs. We cross Ohio and Kentucky. And then we have a family childcare network and home visitation and a family outreach program. So we are living day to day like everyone else. We are having daily call-ins with our executive team, and then we're having daily conference calls with all of our directors to keep them informed, because as we're all living through, it changes by the moment. We are setting up work plans for our staff for when we're presuming we will close. I think that we are right now trying to identify technology issues for our teachers that want to work from home and do some of these things, of who has that ability to read books to children and things like that via the internet. But I was surprised by how many don't have the technology. I don't know why I was surprised with what we pay them, but it's today's challenge. We are looking at how we work with our fee paying, our tuition families. We are 60% of our families are on the child care, I still call it vouchers, everybody. I'm sorry, I'm old. But 40% are fee paying. We gave them 1 week. When we're still opened, they have to pay if they choose not to come. Once we close, we have identified 1 week that they will have no tuition. And we're sending a letter out today with more information, but it might get to the point where we are asking parents to pay tuition, and those who do not have that ability and are not getting paid by their employer to apply for a scholarship or a waiver. We are hearing from a lot of our families that they are working from home and getting paid. Now, they might have to pay for alternate care, so that's another whole situation. It's probably the thing that we're struggling with the most. Also, how long we want to pay our staff for as long as possible. I'm really hoping that unemployment allows us to pay the difference. That would make big impact for us. So I wish I had more insightful information to give everybody, but we are dealing with what everyone else is dealing with, is trying to make decisions as we go.
Thank you, Patty. I appreciate that. So let's move on now to Kim. Kim, if you could quickly share about your organization and the Courageous Conversations.
Sure. So, wow, you're getting so much information thrown at you. So everybody take a breath for a moment. What I was thinking of this morning after the call and what we've been hit with every day is, where can I go for inspiration? And Marian Wright Edelman is one of my idols. And I opened her book, Guide My Feet. And 2 things I want to quickly share with you from her book is, I just want to cry and cry and cry, Lord. I can't bear my burden today or see my way to tomorrow. And when I heard the voice of Stephanie and Misty and Patty, and if we unmuted all 1,000 people of you that are on this call, I know we would hear that same pain in your voice as you're trying to navigate this. So one of the things, as a former family child care provider myself, former faith-based center, I do feel your pain. I can't experience it because I'm not there now. But as Ohio AYC, our team got together and just said, we know you're going to have incredible needs in the coming months, but what could we do for you today? What could we do for you this week? And based on Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead, Brave Work, Tough Conversations, Whole Hearts, she says having courageous conversations mean having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. First of all, I'd highly recommend that book when you're up and you can't sleep at night anyways. It's really helpful for all of the feelings and emotions that you're trying to navigate. If I close my center, who am I hurting? If I keep my center open, who am I hurting? So these courageous conversations are a time to come together and ask questions, process emotions, share any resources that we have with one another, because some of you I know don't have an infrastructure like a board or a larger agency to help you make these decisions. And so we need to be there for one another. We need to keep that connection with one another. One of the things we want that is our principle through all this is that we want to walk through this together in a way that we're proud of ourselves as early childhood professionals when we come out on the other side. So we don't want to forget who we are. We don't want to forget what we stand for. NAYC's Code of Ethical Conduct says first, do no harm, and that takes precedence over all other. So I think we need to look through every decision through that lens. And while there may be some decisions right now that we don't agree with, then we need to get ready to advocate and keep in mind who we are as early childhood professionals, what we stand for, and understand that we still do have a voice and we need to make that voice heard. So we invite you to join any or all of these calls. We're having them daily through the end of the week from 12 to 1 and 7:30 to 8:30. So I could go on, but we've got a lot more to cover for the call. I thank you for giving me the few minutes to talk about this.
Thank you, Kim. Todd, thanks for being ready next.
Certainly. So appreciate everyone's sentiments to this point. So I'm Todd Barnhouse with the Ohio Child Care Resource and Referral Association. We have multiple hats. We do a lot of our work behind the scenes on your behalf, so in supporting a lot of the work that's already been mentioned. But we want to touch real quickly on kind of the waves that we're looking at work. And our CCR&Rs throughout the state will be, one of their primary efforts will be around making sure the essential employees that are identified, their children have a place to go. So wrapped around this focus of these, standing up these pandemic centers, there'll be a lot of efforts around that and making sure that people that have to work, need to work, to be at work, their children have a safe place to go. So that will be one of the primary focuses. But if we look at, if the state continues to move based upon federal options coming to state to local, there's opportunities too, if you're able to continue to pay your, say your program has to close, now would be a great time to get your professional development done. So I know our system has been working on identifying, there's a lot of online offerings already available, but also taking our face-to-face trainings that are already offered at Ohio approved, and our training organizations have the flexibility of now converting those to virtual, utilizing webinars and other technology solutions in order to roll those out. We'll be working with those training organizations and the instructors to make those refinements or changes in order to make that immediately available. But looking at, as long as we're able to continue to support our workforce, we want to continue to support our workforce. We're also in the process of negotiating different arrangements with online training organizations. We have an agreement with Pro Solutions and there's online CDA that we're going to potentially be able to offer scholarships for individuals to take that, to get their CDA during this time frame. But then our network as a system is also looking at, and I, my notes, looking at ways that we can focus on information trainings, short sessions for families, this whole opportunity to continue to engage with the families, the children that are in their homes, as well as then around our workforce, the child care professionals themselves, focusing on topics of self-care, mental health and wellness, and different strategies in order to best support the workforce, as well as then we know as this kind of is ramping up in waves, we'll also have the opportunity to come back in waves, and we want to make sure that folks can come and be as whole as possible, as quick as possible. So we're also looking at opportunities to work around staff, children, families, and business logistics of coming back and returning to programs. And I'll turn it back to you, Robin.
Thank you, Todd. We appreciate Okar's help in providing that for teachers, especially in training. So our last panelist is Michelle Davis. She's with Citywide here in Dayton, and she is going to give an overview about SBA processes. And obviously this is constantly changing, just like everything in our world is shifting by the hour. But she is going to give us a sense of how SBA has worked. And many of you know in Dayton last year, we had tornadoes, and she was really instrumental in helping some of our small businesses get SBA loans as a disaster relief from the tornadoes. So she has that recent experience. Of course, the feds are in the midst of trying to get a package together that will address COVID specifically. So we just wanted to give you some preliminary things to think about for those of you that might consider the SBA loan process. And I know I keep hearing you all saying, what about private pay? What about private pay? We hear you. We don't have answers on all of that, but this is one avenue that could potentially help. So Michelle, if you could give us a little overview about what you know so far. Oh, we have to unmute you, Michelle. Here we go. Can you start again? Sorry.
Sure. Can you hear me now, Robin?
Yes, all good.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, first, I want to say that the Small Business Administration has been in contact with us throughout this whole thing starting and all of the shutdown. They've been very proactive with sending us information about payment deferral. So if any of the healthcare providers currently have an SBA loan, I heard one of the ladies say that, you know, their attendance has dwindled over the past, couple of weeks. And so they can ask if that institution, for instance, would have an SBA loan currently, they can actually ask for payment deferral for up to 6 months. That can help in their cash flow in the interim. It can also help to just free up some money that normally would go to a payment to carry them through, payroll or other expenses that they may have. Then you've heard about the SBA disaster loans. The SBA disaster loans kick in when the declaration is signed by the president, and we are hearing that could happen as early as Friday. The disaster loans are something that are retroactive. That's not something that's going to be that you're going to apply for right away. It's going to be kind of when this period of where we're all staying home, where that ends and the world starts to revolve again, let's just put it that way. Then what you will do, you'll assess what your expenses were if you continue to pay salaries, if you had to continue to pay bills. It goes from everything from debt payments that you've been paying throughout this process to payroll to all kinds of different expenses. And you can apply for assistance. There is an online way to apply, and once the declaration is signed, we will be able to at least go on and look at those things. I provided Robin a list of those items as well as copies of the documents so that anyone who wants to put them on a website can, so people can start collecting that information now. For instance, with the tornadoes last year, the time period for them to apply for financial or economic distress assistance just ended in March. So it gives you till the end of the year at least to assess the situation, because you're not going to know fully how this is going to affect your business until we get through this time period and you guys kind of get back online and are able to assess the damage that's been done financially. We do have a little bit of information about interest rates. For nonprofits, they'll be 2.75% or in that range, and for-profits will be 3.5%. And that is only a quarter of a point over prime right now. So that's very, very good. The other thing that we discussed are type A and B providers and the fact that they need to be filing their income and expenses on a Schedule C on their tax returns. That's important because they need to be able to count that as business income when the SBA is looking at tax returns, which is what they are going to require. Anyone who has not completed their 2019 tax returns, I would highly advise you to get those completed. And if you have not been filing Schedule C as a type A or B provider, I will suggest that you talk to the CPA about continuing to do that. Right now, there is a little caveat where religious affiliations come into play with child care facilities. Religious affiliation is not SBA eligible currently. As you all know, this is ever evolving. That may change, but currently an SBA loan cannot be issued to a religious organization. So that is a little bit of a caveat. And as this evolves, things are going to change. Even through the disasters with the tornadoes, things evolved a little bit there. They kept extending deadlines because they knew that people hadn't completely assessed the situation. So if a deadline comes out and you don't feel like you can meet it, don't panic. Normally they get pushed out, and I'm going to tell you, once this is over, if you're working with a CPA currently, you need to contact your CPA and you need to have them start assessing the situation for you so that you can apply for the correct dollar amount to the SBA, because you can only ask for one loan and you need to make sure you ask for all of the money that you need for recovery. Now keep in mind, these are loans, these are repaid, and there is interest that accrues. So if you don't need it, don't take it. If you do need it just to get over the hump, take it and work that out. The SBA is going to go up to at least 30 years for these loans. In some cases, they may extend it further, but they have not committed to that yet. Robin, is there anything else that you would like me to elaborate on?
I'm trying to see if we've got any questions about this SBA process. I think that's a great overview for now, and we will post some of the information that Michelle referenced if you wanted to start to look at this information. And Michelle is going to be on our call again on Friday at 1 o'clock because she is studying any changes that come and will continue to update us as we learn more. And Julia just posted in the chat room the resources that Michelle shared with me. And we also have them for those of you looking at the Preschool Promise website here in Dayton, we have them on our page. So if you want to start learning about that, and I think one of the important messages she shared is go ahead and get your taxes for 2019 in if you haven't already, because that's something that will be required to be able to consider that. Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate you jumping in to help all of us out. Okay, so I think Julia, did you just post that? I think Julia might have just posted in the chat room. I know we're getting a lot of questions about where can I ask questions about information. So one thing is if you're trying to ask questions about these new temporary rules around the pandemic childcare license, you can call this childcare policy help desk. It's at the bottom when you download and print out these new temporary licenses or licensure procedures. You can see on the second page at the bottom, there is a help desk line. It's probably the regular childcare policy help desk that you call, or you can email the odjfs_childcare@JFS. So that if you want to go directly to JFS, I can tell you again that we're gonna copy and paste all of the questions you've asked today, and we will share those with our state leaders as well. I think we're still getting a lot of questions about the pandemic days. And yes, the pandemic days were intended to be used now. If you decide to close your program now, then you could go ahead and use those just like you would use a professional development day in the system for handling publicly funded childcare. So if you want to use those now, you can go ahead and use those. You do not wait for the governor to mandate closure to use pandemic days. That would be a different payment process that's described in these temporary procedures, just to clarify that. And with that, I know the governor has another press event and many of us will be on that, but I would invite you to join us again on Friday at 1 o'clock. We'll share whatever updates we can at that time. And we'll also have an attorney on to talk about unemployment. And Michelle will be back to share any new information about the SBA loans. So with that, in the spirit of conscious discipline, I wish you all well in this very difficult time, and please make sure you take time to take care of yourself so you can take care of your families and your staff, and we will talk soon. Thank you, everybody.